appetite for beef. To date, over 260 million acres of forest have been destroyed to provide cattle with grazing land, and another acre disappears every 8 seconds.
The primary reason the Amazon forest is being destroyed is not to harvest wood or provide more room for a growing population, but to provide grazing fields and land to grow crops that are then exported to feed livestock throughout the world. Not only does Brazil export most of its crops, but the U.S. exports crops as well, with 2/3 of the U.S. grain harvest going to feed cattle in other countries. So cheap meat can then be imported back into the U.S., and fast food chains can save a nickel on every burger. For every burger imported into the U.S., 67 square feet of rainforest is cleared. Every second, another acre is gone. Every second, our diet is shrinking the lungs of the world. Today, most of the crops in the world are now grown to feed meat and dairy livestock. Tragically, there is plenty of food for the animals we eat, but not enough for the millions of starving people throughout the world. When we clear forests to raise animals, the carbon dioxide stored in trees is released into the atmosphere. And these forest clearing fires represent a whopping 20% of all greenhouse gases. Our appetite for meat, in other words, is a major factor in global warming. One of the biggest challenges facing the future of modern civilization is global warming. And our diet plays a huge role in warming up the planet. Raising hundreds of millions of animals around the world generates more greenhouse gases than all the cars, trucks, planes, and ships in the world combined. The production of just 2 pounds of beef creates the same amount of carbon dioxide as going for a joyride for 3 hours, while leaving all the lights in your home blazing. The consequences of our eating habit are so staggering that if everyone laid off meat just 1 day a week, it would have the same effect as taking 8 million cars off American roads. Eating meat is more significant than most realize because not all greenhouse gases are created equal. While everyone focuses on carbon dioxide, this gas is not responsible for most of the Earth's warming. Other gases trap heat far more powerfully than carbon dioxide, and the most important of these is methane. Methane is over 20 times more powerful in trapping heat than carbon dioxide. In fact, methane emissions are responsible for nearly half of the planet's human-induced warming. The number one source of methane? Raising animals for food. Global meat consumption has skyrocketed in the last 50 years, and current consumption is expected to double in the next 50 years, which means our meat-eating habit will be catastrophic for future generations. The good news? Unlike carbon dioxide, which can stay in the atmosphere for more than a century, methane cycles out of the atmosphere in just 8 years. In other words, by changing your diet, you can have an immediate impact on the cooling of the Earth at every single meal. This is perhaps an embarrassing truth that Al Gore failed to mention in his famous documentary. Embarrassing because his family has always raised Angus beef, one of the biggest methane emitters in the world. Here are his top recommendations. All of these are necessary, but he, like others, have missed the 800-pound gorilla sitting in the room. Not a single mention of the cause of nearly half of our global warming. Hard as this may be to swallow, putting the wrong type of food into your mouth is one of the most significant causes of global warming. And the single most effective thing you can do to help stop global warming is to change your diet. Our diet impacts the environment in many other ways.
The massive amount of crops grown to feed livestock and water pastures consumes over half of the fresh water supply in the U.S. It takes 12,000 gallons of fresh water to produce just 1 pound of beef versus 60 gallons to produce a pound of potatoes. 12 miles of the San Joaquin River in California are now completely dry because water has been diverted to grow crops for farm animals. In some areas, so much water has been diverted from hydroelectric dams that nuclear power plants have had to be constructed to make up for the loss of power. The average American uses just 106 gallons of water a day for domestic needs. But if they eat a quarter-pound hamburger, their daily consumption of water jumps by 3,000 gallons. In the year 2000, the average American consumed 69 pounds of beef and a total of 225 pounds of meat. By giving up meat, you'd be saving over 1 million gallons of fresh water every year. If you added to the price of beef just the water subsidies alone, hamburger would cost $35 a pound. Instead of tinkering with your toilets and shower heads, reducing meat consumption is the best way to conserve our fresh water supplies. Our diet is not only using huge amounts of water, but it's actually depleting our fresh water supplies. The largest source of fresh water in the world will be completely dry in less than 50 years. And once it dries up, the breadbasket of the U.S. will turn into a dustbin. That's the legacy our diet will leave to our children. Eating animals not only consumes half our water, but their excrement pollutes the other half. In fact, farm animals produce 130 times more waste than people do. And yet, not one feedlot or farm in America is required to have a proper sewage system. It's become so bad that animal waste flowing down the Mississippi River has made an area the size of New Jersey totally uninhabitable to marine life. It's called the dead zone. E. coli, salmonella, listeria, and all the other fancy scientific names used to describe food pathogens all boil down to the same thing for the consumer. There's animal excrement in your food. It's become so bad that E. coli is now the leading cause of kidney failure among American children. Modern meat is so burdened with animal waste